AI moves fast, and the path forward isn't always clear. Cisco gives you the infrastructure, security, and insights to stay the course. Cisco, making AI work for you. Visit cisco.com/AI.
Transform your growing business with Intuit Enterprise Suite. Automate complex tasks and make faster decisions with integrated tools for financial management, HR, marketing, and more. Visit intuit.com/enterprise to learn more.
Sharmin, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Kwame. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and we are excited to have you, my friend. So, how would you get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sharmin. I am a serial entrepreneur. I've built and sold about 3 companies so far in the last 15 years of my career. I'm originally from India, an engineer, like most of us Indians are. No big deal. But yes, and I am also very, very enthusiastic about writing, about content, about videos. I've written 3 books. The third one's coming out in June. And I also angel invest a little bit on the side. And now I'm also a full-time keynote speaker. So a bunch of things. But yes, overall, the one motto of my life is to give first.
Incredible. And listeners, you are in for a treat because I met Sharmin in Nashville. We were at a keynote speakers retreat. It's kind of meta. It's a bunch of keynote speakers in the audience learning how to become better at keynote speaking. It's really cool. And I was just enthralled with her story. And what's fascinating about your journey, Sharmin, is the fact that negotiation is a through line. It's almost like a supporting character in everything that you do, whether it's an external negotiation with other people or an internal negotiation with yourself. You're constantly using this to negotiate your way to the top. So let's start off with the story of your first venture, your first entrepreneurial venture. And then let's think about how difficult conversations and negotiation help to shape your success and the lessons that you learned through that process.
Oh my God, that's a great question, Kwame. Thank you. So, just to give you a little spiel about how this whole thing started. So I first came to the US in 2010 when I had a job offer from Google post my engineering. But on the day of joining Google, I said no to them, ended up joining a startup in Chicago, to which, by the way, my nerdy parents were like, who says no to Google? Are you crazy? And I think they were in depression for the next 3 months, but it's okay. Then I joined the startup based out of Chicago, where I was, the third employee, and I eventually ended up becoming the head of sales. I think the biggest learning that I had in that company was negotiation, because I didn't realize what sales was until, a 22-year-old gets to sit with 70, 75-year-old statisticians at these Fortune 500 companies in order to close deals. And I realized that, oh my God, our life is all about negotiation, Anything and everything we do on a day-to-day life is about negotiation. So ended up growing that company from 0 to $300 million in ARR because I decided that, this is something that I love to do, sales, and, this is what I want to do. And then one fine day decided to take an exit and went back to India to start my first company where my entrepreneurial journey and my true path on the road of negotiation also started. So this was basically a Netflix-like platform for Indian vernacular languages. Now, for the uninitiated, there are about 34 officially recognized vernacular languages in India, though we speak like 1,000 plus languages, but there are 34 recognized. Out of those 34, I know like 9 of them. It's like, how difficult can it be to sort of build an OTT platform in this space? Now, I didn't know how to do it from scratch, obviously. But the first thing is that I loved Netflix. I loved movies. It's like, how difficult will it be? Let's figure it out. So, we ended up writing about 70 original scripts of our own. Now, that is one thing. That's just the content. How do you actually put a company together, right? So about hiring, about getting a co-founder, about getting a core team, and then eventually raising investments. I didn't know how to do any of that, but then started meeting people, understood that the only one thing that the human brain really understands is stories, and so figured that out slowly. And that, the biggest learning about negotiation for me has been the fact that we human beings, we want to be heard first. There is that constant thing in our mind that, oh my God, can someone please hear me out? It's not about listening. It's more about, that please hear my story out first. People don't want to just respond to you because they like what you're saying. They respond to you because they're like, I want to be heard. So I understood that the first step to negotiation is to hear people out, what their story is, what is it that they are looking for, if they really have a problem where you can actually help them solve it, and then comes anything else. So the first step for me, at least in my startup building journey, was listening to people before I could really tell them what I'm building and why do I even want them on board. So I figured out that I have great listening skills, great social skills. So that was number one in the path of negotiation for me. Second thing was about, following up, right? And following up and repeatedly telling them that, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. I'd love for you to be, let's say, an advisor or a mentor or an investor, or for that matter, even will you join my core team and sort of, lead a particular function, etc., all of that. So, hearing them out first. Then second thing was about following up constantly. And then third thing was obviously about onboarding them into that particular role. And then, sort of setting expectations right came next, because I think it is really, really important to let people know what is it that you're looking for, and, clearly specifying things that this is what I need, and then sort of have that uncomfortable conversation, which, people don't really like. A lot of people are like, okay, maybe it's taken for granted. He or she will know what I want. No, people don't know what you want. You have to clearly specify it. So these four things I kind of understood about, building companies with my first startup. Yeah.
There is so much to explore here, because I can see how you were able to take the lessons that you learned from the startup that you joined instead of going with Google, and then you use those effectively as you built your own company back home. But there's more to explore, because for me, as the child of immigrants as well, you made it sound really easy to stand up for your parents and go the other direction. So we have to recognize, when it comes to these tough conversations, whatever it happens to be, there are going to be internal, emotional, and psychological barriers that hold us back. And you and I both know of a lot of people who say, okay, my parents put me on this track. I'm going to keep on doing this track, and I'm going to do what either my family or society says I should do, even though it is killing me inside. So what internal negotiation did you have to have with yourself in order to have the strength to shift to something that was more authentic for you?
Hello, my friends. Before we get back to today's episode, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever wondered how to elevate your team's negotiation game and how you can help the folks on your team have better, difficult conversations? At the American Negotiation Institute, we offer transformative keynotes and workshops tailored to empower professionals with top-tier negotiation and conflict resolution skills. Whether it's a keynote for your next event or hands-on training for your team, we've got you covered. Don't just negotiate. Master the art with the American Negotiation Institute. Click the link in the description to find out more. Elevate, negotiate, and succeed.
I think that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked me this. Yes, I just laughed it off. I was like, yes, immigrants and parents and all of that. But, I come from a very Asian nerdy family. Father is a scientist, mother is a lawyer, younger siblings also a scientist. I am apparently the least educated in my family, as my dad puts it. Like, oh, you could have just gotten into Harvard and Wharton, but you never even tried. So, internally, yes, there is a lot of that cognitive dissonance constantly in my life, where initially it was about proving a point to my parents, especially to my dad. Typical nerds, right? I was like, am I not good enough? There was that constant cognitive dissonance that I was a victim to. And, a lot of our parents don't really understand that, unfortunately, because they end up imposing their thoughts and, their desires on their kids. But luckily, I think in my case, I managed to survive. I managed to thrive because I had a very good community of, friends, of co-workers who were really, really supportive. And I must say that the first company where I joined, the founder of that company, we are still friends and we talk till date. And, the one message that he told me was that, Sharmin, your success is 100% a function of your attitude and not your aptitude. This was that one line which he gave me, which kind of changed my life. He was like, it's all about how you perceive things. It's not about how smart or, what your IQ is. It's more of the EQ that actually takes you ahead, more of your attitude towards things. So, I think some of these people in my life, they kind of really helped me put my thoughts in place and sort of be okay with the unconventional path that I'd chosen. I mean, how many people are there who would actually say no to Google? It's a great start to your career, right? I mean, a great thing to have on paper. But now my LinkedIn doesn't say Google. My LinkedIn says startups, and basically chaos, So I'm like the walking chaos journey, right? So I think a lot of great people in my life and a very supportive network was what eventually helped me put my thoughts in place and sort of get that clarity about what is it that I really want to do, and that it's okay to not follow the stereotypical route, especially, being an engineer from India, that, okay, you end up in a tech company. It's okay if you don't want to do that. So I would give it to my network. Yeah.
Amazing. And something that I think is really admirable about the way that you've approached just your career in general is that for most people, it's tough to start a business in general. It's tough to get it to a point where it's sustainable. And it's very, very difficult to get it to the point where you exit it. And you've done this in multiple countries and continents. And so your ability to negotiate translates no matter where you happen to be. And I know that's really tough for people. So can you go into the challenges of navigating the nuances of negotiation in America versus doing it in India?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is another great question. I'm so glad you're just throwing all of these incredible stuff at me. I'm so glad. So yes, overall the challenges are pretty much the same in, every country from a very overall standpoint. But if we were to look at it very objectively, I think, the biggest difference between India and America is that I think India is still very risk averse. Yes, slowly it's kind of improving. Things are getting better. So if I were to connect the dots between being a startup entrepreneur in India and a startup entrepreneur in the US, right? Because I've built companies there and I've built companies here. The first thing is that, negotiation becomes really easy in the US. And I can say this with some confidence because people have the capability to, take far greater risks as compared to any other country, not just India. But in the US, I think there is a lot of capital out there available to just put into research and development, because entrepreneurs are all about trying different things out. Some things work and some things don't work, but it's all about taking that risk. So I think this is the best thing about America, that, if you have to get as a startup founder, in order to get credence as an entrepreneur, especially in the tech industry, you like it or you don't like it, as a founder, you have to be in the US. This is something that I would just give it. I would just give it to the US. And I think has been my biggest learning, that access to capital and the mindset of people, right? Negotiation is all about, how do you even negotiate with someone when they are not even willing to take a risk on you? It's basically a bet, right? So that is incredible. Number one, about, I think, US. India is still upcoming. It's still a few years behind. India is amazing. People are great. Huge population, 800 million people below the age of 35. So there is a lot of potential, obviously. But I think it's US is at least a decade ahead of India. The reason being that there is a lot of risk potential and the accessibility to capital overall. And another thing I would say is that India, people are very analytical, you know. It's I think the mindset, very, very analytical. They want to see numbers, they want to see data, but in the US, I think people are far more emotional. If they like you as a founder, that's it. If they like your story, the story just sells, as in your background, your experiences, who you are as a person, your attitude. They just want to get on a call with you because you have a great story, which I think is very easy. So I think doing sales, doing, all of those conversations in America has been easier for me, at least, has been easier for me because I'm a storyteller. This is what I do. I engage with people. I know how to strike a chord with people by, sharing stories, by listening to them, all of those things. So that is, I think, far easier for me in the US than in India, because in India, it's a more reference kind of a thing that, okay, if you want to go via a reference, number one. Number two is that they want to see some real data, So for a first time entrepreneur, you need, it's kind of easier if you have a godfather, or a godmother to sort of back you. But in the US, even if you are, let's say, a student from a university who's just starting out, if you have a great story and if they see great potential in you, they'll just give you that meeting. They're like, okay, come, let's talk. Come, let's do things. So these are the two differences that I've seen. India's upcoming. So I think India's transitioning from that traditional conventional mindset to becoming more risk averse and to sort of taking more bets and, not just being very analytical, but also being emotional. So these two things that I've seen are the two biggest differences between negotiation in US and in India.
This breakdown is fantastic. And it makes a lot of sense, too, when you think about scarcity plus competition that equals really tough negotiations. And if there's just more money flowing in the US, then that's going to make those negotiations go a lot easier. And I think a lot of folks would have been surprised with the way that you took the cultural nuances, because some people will say, well, in America, this is the business culture. In India, this is the business culture. So you adjust in these ways, and you just went straight to the practical side where it's like, hey, there's more money, it's easier here. So let's focus on that. Yeah. And I think that's really helpful. And there's a really empowering mindset that I want people to pay attention to, because a lot of times we have these assumptions about how other people are going to act or what a culture is like, and it turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy that can hold us back. And so both of us are here. We're people of color. You're a woman as well. And so with a lot of literature, they would say, well, women founders get significantly less. People of color get significantly less. And you didn't focus on that. You didn't focus on that because that could hold you back. And then that orients you in a disempowered mindset, because you say, if I'm focusing on those statistics in those conversations, I am thinking about all of the reasons that I'm going to fail that are completely out of my control. That changes the way that we interact with the other person. And then we don't have the same amount of swagger and confidence. And so they say, I don't think this is the one. And then we say, see, they're racist and sexist. And they don't realize, like, we started that. And so I really want to hammer home that empowerment piece, because this is so powerful, because you've done it in multiple continents and you've done it here multiple times. So I just want to make sure that people can take that message, because sometimes our biggest barrier to success is ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're so right about this. I'm just diverting a little bit, but the other day I was having a call with my publicist, who's been my publicist the last 7 years. And the one thing that he told me is that, Sharmin, you're like every PR person's dream. Like, why? Because you're a woman. I come from a country which is outside of the US, obviously, so immigrant. And then you're a woman of color. And then, you are a woman in tech. And more importantly, I have a very mixed background, so I am half Indian, quarter Kazakh, and quarter French from my mom's side, So I'm like, I'm half Muslim and 1/4 Christian, 1/4 Jew, So it's like living, breathing Abraham, right? So my publicist is like, oh my God, I love you. There's just so much content that is there around you. So because you're a keynote speaker yourself, in all of my keynotes, people are like, okay, what do you speak on? AI innovation. Yes, that's been sort of, my keynote area. So I recently did a keynote in, Austin during South by, and they were like, okay, can you just sprinkle a little bit of women in tech, a little bit of women in color? I'm like, okay, for sure, you got it. Okay, tell me what color you want me to be, and I'll do that. I mean, I take it in a very jokingly, sort of in a very fun banter way. But then I understand DEI and then SDG and stuff that they are looking at sort of incorporating. But all of these things, they just come to me like, because I've been doing this, I've been breathing this, right? And then navigating my way through that, through all of this, basically negotiating my way, and then coming out as someone who's not scared or who's not afraid to sort of be whatever that I want to be. I mean, the learning curve has been intense. It wasn't easy at all, but now I just laugh it out. I'm like, okay, I've done it for almost 15 years. I'll do it for the next 15 and then we'll see. But yeah, it's been intense.
That's incredible. I love it. And the best communicators are able to flex different parts of their identity and their history depending on who's in front of them, right? And you're able, the more life experiences that you have and the more you push yourself into different arenas, the more you're going to be able to connect with different people authentically, which is incredible. And I want to circle back to the topic of the first multi-million-dollar company that you started and exited from. So tell us the story about how you strategically positioned yourself for an exit, and then what that exit looked like, and how the negotiation went.
Right. So, one lesson learned in life is that building a company, the journey, starting it is much easier, but actually exiting the company is far more difficult than even starting it. That's where the biggest challenge is. But of course, the first company, what happened was that, because it was an OTT platform, Netflix like platform for Indian vernacular languages. So there are obviously many factors that kind of, factored in. The first thing was that with me, because of the first company, after saying no to Google when I joined this startup, so I kind of got that whole network of people. I had a lot of learning. I knew how to build a few things from scratch and then sort of how to connect with people. So one thing that I learned first was that, timing is very, very important for anything, be it starting a company, be it building products, be it selling it to people, or exiting. If you are a little clairvoyant and, if you have that little vision, foresight to sort of understand when is the right time to do what, like right now, it's all about AI. Back then in 2014, there was still Indian audiences were still very much prone to consuming content on the television sets. And, the transition from TV to digital media, it hadn't really happened as much. But then Netflix was already a big hit in the US. I mean, from selling CDs to finally doing content and so on digital media, it was a big thing. So I kind of knew that, and I'd sort of been there, in the US from 2010 to 14. So I'd seen that whole transition happening. So I was like, okay, now I know what's going to come in India. So I went back to India to build that, and sort of had my own production house, did a lot of theater, did a lot of sort of, collaborated with the right set of people, raised a bunch of $1 million of money, and then sort of built that platform, and then exited from that in 2018. So, the first thing was that I knew back then, there was no Amazon Prime in India. There was no Netflix in India. There was no, all of the HBOs of the world and stuff in India. It wasn't there. So I was like, okay, I knew when was the right time to sort of take an exit, because these guys were just coming in India, before then. So I was like, okay. And of course, because we were creating a lot of content, we had 5 million plus followers on our socials and stuff. So, people knew about the content that we were creating. Also, because our content was very, very, it was talking about stories of people from India, like I wasn't really talking about a Google story or, building the next Apple in India. I was talking about what the common man really experienced day-to-day lives, about social causes and stuff. So we kind of knew how to hit the chord, how to sort of resonate with our viewers, right? So that is something that we'd already figured that out. We'd negotiated with, a bunch of those people to sort of understand what is it that they really want. So we done that groundwork. Now, when it came to exiting it, right? So, of course, investors need their money back. They have certain expectations. So we kind of knew that, okay, who do we reach out to? Which production houses would be, the right ones? So because of all the things and all the PR that we'd already gotten, so a bunch of production houses had anyway reached out to us saying that, we love your content. We want to get the copyrights to all of your content. And then eventually all of that content is now running on, multiple platforms that I see on a daily basis. I'm like, hey, that's my story. I know that. We wrote it. Just that we can't claim any more copyrights to it because they've given it all. But, so it wasn't a one-day thing. It was across 4.5 years, from 2014 to 2018, the whole journey that happened, So building the network, constantly staying in touch with the right set of people, talking to them. I mean, negotiating, again, sales, which is all about negotiation, right, is basically a step-by-step process. You have to be visible. You have to let people know that you're there, right? And build that network, stay in touch with them, constantly following up with them. So we did all of that and then eventually ended up getting the 8-figure exit that we needed. We knew that this was coming. We knew that Amazon Prime Video and Netflix and some of those incredible other platforms were moving to India and they were going to create some incredible content. We just ended up being there at the right time, at the right place, just before that boom happened. So timing was amazing. So, negotiation again is all about timing also, right? If they don't need that at that point in time, who do you even sell it to? So yeah, I think the timing was the biggest success criteria in my journey. Yeah.
Incredible. There's so much to unpack here, Sharmin, because I think a lot of times people think about the exit as an event. It happened at the end. You just said, okay, I'm ready to exit. And then you started beginning the negotiations. But you have to begin with the end in mind. So this whole time, as you're building the company, you're making connections with investors, you're filling the roster with exceptional people, you're keeping in touch with the people down the road who you might not need in this moment right now, but potentially 4 years down the road, they could be part of this exit. So there's a beautiful long game that you played with all of this, not just with the building of the company, but negotiating alongside the build so you could have that massive exit at the end.
Absolutely. You're bang on right. That is exactly the summary of what I said. Yes.
This is great. And now let's bring you back to the US because you were not done. Even though you did what most people would consider like the pinnacle of a career accomplishment, you said, well, I've still got years left, so I'm going to do more. So tell us about the next one, the next startup that you created and then exited from.
Right. So my second company was, I was back in San Jose. So we were building a platform which was basically an emotional AI for product reviews. That's how the journey started. And then we went into, sort of content optimization, content generation, all of that. Yes. We raised a ton of money. We did a lot of things. But, life happened to me. I ended up suffering a cardiac arrest at the age of 33 after raising a lot of money because completely stress-induced. We created so many jobs, 1,000+ employees, etc. But I realized that, I was just so busy negotiating with, life. I mean, that is when reality strikes that, you cannot negotiate with life. Life just because when life strikes you back, it strikes really hard. And that's what happened. I didn't have a choice. I was forced to take an exit. And, 3 months later, my co-founder also took an exit. Eventually, yes, the company, got acquired and the investors had beautiful exits and stuff. But my journey had to kind of take a stop in between because I realized that, I can negotiate anything, but I think life kind of hit it back. Life was like, don't mess with me. I need to rest, So yeah, that happened. That was my second startup. So in 2022, I sort of had a ton of health issues. I was diagnosed with clinical depression also. and, had to do a lot of therapy for the next 18 months and stuff. But yeah, that was the journey that happened with my second company.
And I appreciate you sharing this. I know it's not easy to tell, but it's something that you've shared publicly so many times before, and it takes a lot of resilience to be able to share such a tough part of your life.
Yeah.
So I just want to state appreciation for that. And then also, I think so many entrepreneurs can find themselves in this position where they are driven in a way that is very admirable, but sometimes you don't have an off switch. You don't know how to slow it down. And I've found myself in that situation as well. And so when we think about the conversations we have to have with ourselves, where we're trying to negotiate peace within our own minds, how now do you find that balance so you don't find yourself in a position like that?
Yeah. So, I did a bunch of things. Of course, it wasn't easy. So 2022 and then a part of 2023 were extremely difficult in my life. The two most difficult years of my life. So I took some time off. Of course, I practiced a lot of mindfulness. I traveled to a lot of countries just to, get some time to introspect and sort of figure things out for myself. Did a lot of yoga, meditation, all of those things. Did a lot of reading. I wasn't doing anything else. I was just spending time with myself. It was like revisiting the art of negotiation with life. As in, like I was basically like head on with my life. Where my life turned out to be the one villain in my life, right? Where you are competing with yourself and you're like, why did this happen? What went wrong? What is it that I wasn't doing right that you had to hit me so hard and sort of make me realize that, hey, come to a standstill and look back, So I did a lot of that, a lot of introspection, a lot of therapy. I have a full-time therapist now, and she's been there with me the last 3 years. And it's been like completely life-changing, life-affirming. I must say that I've been mind-boggled at times. Like there are times when I wanted to sort of hit myself in the head, and I'm like, why did this happen to me? Depression? How me? Why me? And then sort of being at my lowest, being in an abyss where it was completely dark and I didn't know what to do. At that point in time, even a single ray of hope actually helps, to sort of come out. Now I'm just saying it very easily, but I remember there were 6 months in my life when I was completely under house arrest. I would not talk to anybody. I was in total depression, total depression. And, a lot of people don't talk about this, but there comes a time when you have to start talking to yourself, like look yourself in the mirror and be like, I need some inner work. I need to negotiate with myself first and strike a deal that, okay, going forward, these are some of the things that I'm going to do. I'm going to, fix myself first. And so, as much as I love the name of your podcast, Negotiate Anything, I must say that, the biggest negotiation for me has been with my own life. At 33, when you're in the hospital and the cardiologist walks in and tells you, how old are you again? 33. And this is what has happened. Why? So that was basically my life negotiating with me that, Sharmin, this is where we are. If you don't stop right now, then we are not getting anything but just hitting the grave. You don't want to do that at 33, right? You want to live at least a full life and sort of see everything. And so, yeah, me negotiating with my life has been the toughest negotiation ever. But I managed to survive.
And that's so important. And it's the toughest negotiation any of us will have, but it's also the most rewarding. It's the foundation for everything else. And we can see, and I'm speaking from experience too, from the outside looking in, it can seem like everything is going perfectly well. But if you haven't had that negotiation with life itself, it doesn't matter how many external accomplishments you get. You can't fix what's inside with more things and more accomplishments. So yeah, this is so good. I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I wish we would have this conversation sooner. It would have been better for both of us if we would have figured this out too. But it's important, and you're doing such a great job spreading the word. And now let's talk about the latest edition, because we've got the keynote speaking, we've got the book deals, and the new venture that you're embarking on. And so I think from keynote speaker to keynote speaker, I'd love to hear your perspective on the negotiations you're having now with like getting speakers gigs. We don't need to talk numbers here, but just in general, how does it feel from going from those, like the really intense startup negotiations, to now negotiating speakers fees and things like that?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, from one speaker to another. So, yeah, I think the first thing is that, so I have one message that I always give from my keynotes, and the message is mediocrity is the only sin. That is my message, because that's been what my life has been around as an entrepreneur. So, all of my discussions are around that. I talk about AI, about innovation, and now also about mental health and women in tech, because these have been the stories of my life. So, a lot of my negotiations are obviously taken care of by my manager. But yes, what I've seen is that in general, so I've done about 7 keynotes already in this year, in the last 2.5 months. I've spoken at a bunch of tech events, because that's essentially the kind of audience that I address. Also doing a keynote tour in April, as in, in 5 cities, and probably 3 more should get added in the month of April. So, talking at a bunch of Fortune 500 companies, and basically talking about innovation and AI. So a lot of my negotiation there is kind of, around, about the topics, of course, what I'm talking and who I'm addressing, and, what is their problem statement, what is it that they are looking for from a speaker, and, how to sort of bridge that gap, what their problem is, or, what is it, the kind of inspiration that they're looking for, and how I can sort of meet that. A lot of the conversations are around that. Of course, the speaker fees, all of those things are something that my manager takes care of. There is a set fee. I mean, it depends on the number of audiences that I'm talking to, the kind of place that it is, and of course their paying capacity. And I do have a set number that I'm expecting. So of course those things are, some of those conversations that my manager does. But other than that, I think the most important negotiation that I kind of do with myself before I'm going and speaking to an audience is mostly around the fact that, what is the takeaway that I want them to go home with, that, we heard this person who's an Indian immigrant who came to the US first in 2010. She's had a bunch of learnings across multiple different, domains and fields. And what kind of sort of a mind mapping that I can really do with them, and what is it that I'm sort of, spreading. So my messaging is mostly around mediocrity being the only sin in life, and, sort of how you can take a step forward from that, and sort of how do you push your boundaries, how do you break the stereotypical things that you're a part of, and, innovation, be it in your boardroom or, be it in your cubicle. So I kind of show that whole journey from cubicle to, the boardroom, like, as in how do you go the whole CXO route and things like that, because that's the audience that I speak with. So, a lot of those things. And my negotiation with me is all about what is the takeaway that I want my audiences to go home with. Yeah.
Incredible. I love this too, because I was interested to see where you would go with it, because different audiences want different things. And sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can weave my approach around this. And sometimes it's like, hey, you might just need a different speaker. Like I might not be the one. If an audience is saying, Sharmin, we actually want to talk about mediocrity being the answer. Can you talk about that? You're like, no, I can't. That's not what I do. So yeah, I think it's important to get that the content collaboration too, because every audience is different. They want a different approach. Some things that, and I know for me sometimes, especially when we're talking about negotiating sensitive issues, there are some things where people are saying, hey, make sure you don't approach it in this way because of this type of issue, politics and things like that. So that comes up from time to time. But yeah, the negotiations about the money are often the easiest parts. Sometimes it's the content that's the toughest part.
Content is the toughest part. Absolutely, for me too. Yeah. Money is something that my manager takes care of. I don't really have to wring my head there. But content is where I am constantly, thinking that what is it that, I don't want to hurt people's sentiments, obviously, but I have a message. And if that is something that goes with the organizers, then yes, I'm in. Otherwise, maybe I'm not the right person.
Exactly. No, that's great. And Sharmin, before you go, I want to give you an opportunity to give a shout out to what you're currently working on, the new venture, and then the new book, and how people can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So, the last 6 months I've done nothing pretty much because I was figuring out what to do next. So I recently met some very interesting people and they told me that, the one thing that you can do is to leave your legacy behind. And how do you do that is by productizing yourself because it's you, so it's unique. And because it's a product, so, you can scale it. So basically, I'm scaling my brain. That's what I'm trying to do. So my legacy is all around entrepreneurship. So I'm starting a new company now, already did, which is called establish.club, which is essentially how do you establish yourself as a $1 million entrepreneur. So going the whole idea to exit route, where I have put together all of my learnings from the last almost 15 years of building companies. So how do you validate your idea? How do you build your product? How do you build a team? Go the sales route, the whole negotiation aspect, everything in and around building a company. I've put it all together in the form of a course, and I'm now building a community, which is basically establish.club, hence the .club domain for, entrepreneurs, investors, stakeholders in companies. And basically what I want to build with this is the Harvard for entrepreneurship. So I'm very excited. And I have an upcoming book, which is called Bitch, Stop, Please, An Entrepreneur's Journey of Innovation from Chaos to Clarity, the story of all our lives. And it should be out in June. It's now out for pre-order on Amazon. And you can get in touch with me on my website, sharminali.com. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Sharmin. Really appreciate it.
Congratulations! You've just joined an elite club. By listening to a full episode, you're now officially on the Negotiate Anything team. So welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episodes of the show. The best things in life lie on the other side of difficult conversations. Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep getting better. Your relationships will improve, your career will soar, and you'll have the confidence you need to get the most out of these crucial conversations. Again, thank you for joining the team. We're excited to have you, and I will see you in the next episode. I'll catch you later.